People assume that once the case is over, once the person has been convicted, once everything is done, then that's the ending. That's the happy ending. And for me, it really wasn't. No one sat me down and said, this is what you might feel next. This is how your body is going to respond or react. This is what trauma can do. Everything was building and building, and it was all sitting in my body. It was all here. My body just went, nope, no more. I'm done, and completely broke down. My thoughts were getting louder and louder. My fear was getting stronger, and I genuinely believed that I was dying. I got to hospital, and they sectioned me. And the hospital that I went to near me, they used to have a psych ward, but they got rid of it for whatever reason, probably funding. And the biggest thing I've learned through all of this is trauma doesn't just live in your memories, it lives in your body. And sometimes it just gets too much. It will be okay. And I am okay. And I genuinely thought every day I was going to die. And I'm here. And I've created the Be Brave project, and I've created a podcast, and I speak out on social media, and I have never felt stronger and more empowered in my life. But you will get there. And you will be okay. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Be Brave Project podcast. Today is slightly different because I'm actually on my own. I really wanted to share my story a little bit deeper into certain sections. I have obviously done an episode explaining my childhood experiences, but I also really wanted to come on here and talk about something that happened to me since the trial and the experiences that I had when I was a child. So that's what I want to go through today. So I think I want to talk about something that I don't think is spoken about enough, and that is what happens after trauma, what happens after the court process, what happens after justice has been given. Because I think a lot of people assume that once the case is over, once the person has been convicted, once everything is done, then that's the ending. That's the happy ending. And for me, it really wasn't. My trial ended at the end of 2019, and he went to prison. He was sentenced to 9 years, and he was convicted on 7 counts. And from the outside, that looks, I suppose it could look like closure. It looks like justice, which it was. Don't get me wrong, it was justice, and I did get justice. But what people don't see is that what happens afterwards. So he was convicted in December 2019. And after that, there was absolutely no support. There was no guidance. No one sat me down and said, this is what you might feel next. This is how your body is going to respond or react. This is what trauma can do. Because realistically, I had the trauma from when I was a child, but I was also re-traumatized with the nearly 3 years of the investigation and then the 2-week trial. It was a whole re-traumatization, and no one really explained that to me. And it was very much, off you go, get on with your life. Congratulations, he's been sentenced, exactly what you wanted. Pop out, pop the champagne, and go and celebrate. And I didn't really understand what I was feeling, because I didn't feel like that. I didn't feel like I wanted to pop the champagne and go and toast. It wasn't a celebration for me. It was a very, very confusing feeling. I felt a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. I remember saying to a few people, I feel like I've sent someone to prison. I've sent him to prison. I have sent another human being to prison. And it was a very odd feeling, because even though he deserves to be in prison, and I'm glad that he is in prison now, but at the time, it was a very weird feeling. And also because for nearly 3 years, I was constantly being told by the detective, don't get your hopes up, because, it doesn't really often happen. It's his word against yours or your word against his. It's probably not going to get a guilty verdict. It'll probably go to a hung jury. People want, all of these things. So I was prepared for a guilty, not guilty. So it was a very weird, it was a very, very weird feeling. Anyway, and then in March 2020, so it had been a couple of months since the trial. March 2020, we went into lockdown. The whole world collapsed and the UK went into a whole nationwide lockdown. And like everyone else, I was stuck at home, but I was also trying to process everything that I had been through. I was living in a flat with a 2.5-year-old. I wasn't seeing any friends. I wasn't really seeing my family as much as I would have liked. I was also navigating an incredibly toxic relationship. And after going through the police investigation and a 2-week trial where I had to relive absolutely everything, it was a lot. Even I can feel it here, even talking about it now. And I didn't realize it at the time, but how much it was actually affecting me. Because I did just keep going, like so many of us do. You wake up, you get up. I had a 2.5-year-old to look after. I got up, I got her breakfast, I got dressed, I got showered, I got on with my life. And in that year or so, I actually ended up writing a children's book that I got published. I then did disclose my story on social media because a lot of my friends didn't know what happened to me. So I felt like I was okay. But what I now understand is that everything was building. And I sort of explain it to my daughter like building blocks. So, it was the trauma from childhood, the investigation, the court case, the emotional aftermath, the isolation of lockdown, the, toxic relationship that I was in. Everything was building and building, and it was all sitting in my body. It was all here. And it was just building and building and building until finally I think it was August 2022, my body just went, nope, no more, I'm done, and completely broke down. And I remember it starting relatively suddenly and very quickly. My body just begun doing really strange things that I couldn't understand or I couldn't explain. I remember driving to my friend's house with my daughter in the car, and I was driving, and then all of a sudden I had this just horrific headache. It was like a cluster headache right in the beginning, front part of my head, and severe pain behind my eyes. And my vision went all weird. And I had never suffered with migraines before. I think I had one migraine when I was 16, and then I didn't really ever suffer with them. Really horrific. But it was more the vision that was going strange. And then I got this severe pain in the back of my neck and down my back and around my eyes. Anyway, it was horrific. And over the course of a couple of days, the headache got worse, the vision got worse, the pain in my back and my neck got worse. I then started getting tingling all over my body. I started feeling really sick. I started feeling really dizzy. I had really bad vertigo, which I didn't realize at the time it was that, but it is now. And these visual disturbances. So the visual disturbances that I was getting was like when you used to turn on a TV back in the day and it wasn't tuned and it was kind of all static, like the black and white fuzz. That is what my vision was going like. It was the overlay on what you see now. So that's what I had. Horrific. I had unbelievably amount of floaters trailing, so everything was staying. I still have it now. Night blindness. So when it was very dark, I couldn't see an effing thing. It was completely, I was blind. The real pain in my neck, my back, tingling, the sickness, the tinnitus. I have tinnitus as well. That started. I can't remember what it's called. It's not called photosynthesis. That's not what it's called. But it's where you look at something and then they stay and the images stays in your eye, in your vision. It was really, really horrific, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. So I was incredibly anxious. And it's to the point where I couldn't breathe. I couldn't sleep at all. I was having severe panic attacks. And when you don't sleep, everything obviously becomes a lot worse. So over the coming weeks, it was horrific. So I remember saying to my mom, right, I've got to go to hospital because this is not normal. This is not normal. So I did. I took myself to the hospital. I sat in A&E for God knows how long. And as I was waiting there, they asked what my symptoms were. I was then rushed to have a CT scan. I had that. I then went back into the waiting room and had to wait there for several more hours. I was then seen by a stroke team And because I had all these other symptoms like vertigo and stuff and dizziness, I couldn't balance properly. So they genuinely thought that I had a mini stroke. So that's one thing they said to me. They went, "Oh, you might be having a mini stroke, so we have to give you some medication." So they did that. So I'm sitting there on my own thinking, "Oh my God, I'm having a mini stroke. Like, what the hell? What does that even mean?" Then they said, "Oh no, it probably isn't a mini stroke, but we're going to send you down for another CT scan." And this time they put the dye in, and we're going to make sure that there's no growths. And I went, "Growths, tumors. Oh my God, I've got a brain tumor." Had that, then it came back that I didn't have a brain tumor, but they wanted to keep me in overnight because the symptoms were not good. So I then had another CT scan the next morning. So this time I'd had nearly at 3. And again, they did the dye, but it's like a different, I can't really remember. They did a different one where they put a dye in. And I think they were looking for some, I can't remember, to be perfectly honest with you, but I had another CT scan. Then I was seen by a consultant neurologist, and he did all the tests, and he said, "No, you're absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Your CT scans have come back normal. I think what you've had is a absolute horrific migraine." And I thought, really? I've had a migraine for nearly 10 days. I wasn't convinced. I really wasn't convinced. And so anyway, I was discharged and I went home. The symptoms were getting worse and worse and worse. My thoughts were getting louder and louder. My fear was getting stronger. And I genuinely believed that I was dying. And from that point, I've gone into hospital, but from that point, I was then in and out of hospital constantly because I wasn't convinced that it was just a migraine. So I went back into hospital. I had an MRI that came back normal. And every time I went back in, I was told something different. So that doctor, the stroke team, they said it could be a mini stroke. Then they said it could potentially be a brain tumor. Then I was told that it could potentially be the start of MS. Then they said it might be a tumor in my neck. I was never given any clear answers. I was just always given, "Oh, it could be this." So when you're given these horrific things, honestly, my anxiety and my fear was just, my mind was going to the worst possible place. And when you already have anxiety, especially me, it was just awful. And I had a young daughter at the time. B was 4. And I remember sitting there thinking, I'm going to die. I'm going to leave her. And that one thought alone was enough to send me into a complete and utter panic. I wasn't functioning. I couldn't parent properly. I couldn't look after myself. I was just existing in this constant state of fear. And eventually, after several weeks of just not getting any answers, I actually did some research myself. My mum, bless her, she thought, "Oh, let's go out because they have a place in Spain. Let's go out to Spain and give you a few days away from B." She was then with her dad and see if it can get better. It was absolutely awful. I had really bad derealization and dissociation, and I was awful. And my poor mum, I was horrific to be around. I wasn't eating. I didn't sleep. I didn't talk to her. I wasn't fun. It was like being with someone that was about to go off and kill themselves. That's where I was. I was so horrifically ill. And when I was there, I actually started doing my own research, and I found that I potentially could have this condition called visual snow syndrome. And I remember thinking, "Oh my God, that is what I've got. That is everything that it was stating that visual snow syndrome is." I was like, "That's what I've got." But being who I am, I deep dived into all the worst possible things. My brain was already in a horrific state of fear. So I obviously went to the worst case. And the thing is with visual snow syndrome is there's no cure. There's nothing that they can do. So at this point, my mental health had completely deteriorated. Like I said, I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping. I had lost about a stone and a bit in several weeks. I was frail, I was exhausted, I was in constant pain. I had constant headaches, constant neck pain, back pain, tingling. I was put on some sort of medication, like migraine medication, but it wasn't really doing anything. And yeah, it kind of helped, but not really. I mean, Nurofen was the only thing that was kind of getting rid of it. And my anxiety was just getting the worst it had ever been. And I came back from Spain and I was so consumed by the fact that I had visual snow syndrome and it was going to get worse and there's no cure. I was just making myself worse and worse and worse. And I stayed at my parents' house for several days because I wasn't parenting properly. And one day, it was in the day, it wasn't at nighttime. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't get up. I don't think I'd showered for several days, maybe even a week. I wasn't brushing my teeth. I wasn't brushing my hair. My hair was greasy and dirty. My skin was awful. I hadn't washed my face. I was smelly. But the truth is, I didn't care about any of that. I didn't care about any of that. All I cared about was the fact that I thought I was going to die. And that is really hard to admit. And I've never said that out loud because, thinking about that, it makes me feel awful and incredibly embarrassed and just very shameful, really, that I also put my parents and my family through this because they were reliving it as well. But at the time, the only thing I cared about was what I was going through and that I was going to die. And strangely enough, I was having thoughts about ending my life. But at the same time, I didn't want to die. It was a very confusing place to be because I thought I can't tell you how frightened I was on every single minute of the day. I was so, so scared. So when you're in that absolute state of fear, the last thing you want to do is be here. Because I thought, well, if I'm going to be feeling like this for the rest of my life, I don't want to be here. But I'm absolutely terrified of dying. It was very strange, very confusing place to be. And I felt like I was outside of my body all the time, watching myself. And I just kept on, feel like I was screaming at myself, going, what are you doing? Snap out of it. But I couldn't. And I also really want to clarify and make this clear. You cannot just snap out of it when you're in a state like that. And no matter what anyone says to you, you can't. And when I was at my parents', I got to the point where I had a severe, severe panic attack. I couldn't breathe. I was crying uncontrollably. And I went into a slight psychosis episode. And I don't really remember much of it. My mum said, she remembers it, and she said it was very similar to something that she'd seen out of a film. It was just horrific. And she genuinely didn't know what to do anymore. She was trying so hard, and so was my sister, and so was my dad, and they didn't know what to do. So she called an ambulance, and like I said, I don't remember much of it, but they took my vitals. Everything was fine. I do remember them discussing with my mum. I can't remember what they were saying, but I remember my mum talking to them, and I remember her sort of saying, I don't know what to do. You need to take her because she's not okay. But my vitals were fine. Like, physically, I was okay. I wasn't having a heart attack, or, all of those things. But mentally, I was absolutely batshit fucking crazy. So, yeah, I remember my sister trying to calm me down. Remember feeling really disconnected from myself. The ambulance then came and they did the vitals and stuff. And they eventually did blue light me to hospital. And it's not funny. It's really not funny because when I think back on it, it was fucking awful. It was awful. But I got to hospital. I was on my own. I got to hospital and they sectioned me. And the hospital that I went to near me, they used to have a psych ward, but they got rid of it for whatever reason, probably funding. So there was nowhere for me to actually go, but they had to I remember them putting me in this room and locked the door, and I was on my own in sort of like the A&E department, but it was an actual sectioned off room. And they locked the door and I couldn't get out. The only time I could get out was if I pressed the button if I needed to wee, and I was escorted to the toilet because they honestly thought I was a danger to myself and danger to other people probably. And I was an absolute mess. Like I said, I hadn't showered. I was really smelly. I hadn't brushed my teeth. I probably looked like an absolute nutcase. God, it's really hard to relive because I was so bad. And you don't think that this is going to be part of your story. There was no part of me that thought that I was going to be sectioned because they believed that I was a danger to myself. I wasn't eating. I hadn't drunk anything. And I do remember the next morning I hadn't slept. They did give me a sleeping pill. I remember them giving me a really, really strong sleeping pill, and I took it and I still didn't sleep. Although the nurse came back in the next morning, she said, "No, you did." I said, "I don't think I did." She went, "No, I promise you, you had a few hours sleep. You did sleep." So obviously I was fighting it so much. I didn't think I had, but I had slept a little bit. And she sat with me. She said, before you leave, we're going to discharge you because you can't stay here. You have to eat. And I said, "I don't want to eat. I don't want anything." She said, "No, you have to eat." And she said, "If you don't drink any water and you don't eat, you are going to die." And eventually I did. I took a few bites and I had a few sips of water, and someone came to me that was from that, mental health crisis place. And she wrote everything down, and I was under observation, even though I was discharged. I stayed at my mum and dad's for a while, and after that, I then managed to go and see a consultant called Dr. Mark Weatherall, who was a neurologist, but he specifically deals with people with visual snow syndrome. And I went to go and see him. I did have another MRI. Everything came back normal. And he said, I remember him getting my MRI up on the screen. I saw my brain. He did my neck as well. And he said, "You have got a beautiful brain. It is so overactive." And I was like, "What does that mean?" And he said, "You do. You have visual snow syndrome." And there's not a lot of research with visual snow syndrome. They're doing a lot more, but it's not as well known. Most people probably listening to this have no idea what visual snow syndrome is. I think it affects like 2% or 3% of the population. It's very rare. And some people are walking around with it and don't know it because they've had it from birth, so they don't know any different. And yeah, I went to see him. I did feel a lot better. He put me on a drug called topiramate, which is specifically prescribed for people with epilepsy and severe migraines. It did help some of the symptoms, but it didn't help that many. The visual snow was still there. But over time, the visual snow syndrome, I still live with it. It's still there, but anxiety makes it a lot worse. Sorry, not better. It makes it a lot worse. So after seeing him, slowly, very slowly, I started to get better. Because I'd been into the hospital and I was sectioned and I was given, my details were passed on, I was then offered therapy. And I actually still see the therapist that I was given. I still see her now every 2 weeks. She is amazing. And my anxiety began to settle slightly. And I did start eating again. I started sleeping more. I went into the therapy, and it took about a year from all of that to actually start coming back to myself. And even now, like I said, I still live with visual snow syndrome. Some days are better, some days are worse. Like today, actually, funnily enough, it's quite bad. The weather makes it worse as well, the heat. My vision is strange. But to be honest, because I've had it for so many years, I'm very used to it. I don't see them. I have to really focus on the static and the floaters and the blurred vision and the light sensitivity. And I don't really get tingling. Sometimes I do, but it's something that I've just become very used to. Yeah. And I also get that thing where, I've got it now actually, where things look like they're moving, but they're not. So it's very weird. And I get quite a bad vertigo and I look really bad tinnitus. But like I said, it's something that I've learned to live with, and my brain doesn't really notice it anymore. It is a condition that they think is connected to severe trauma, head trauma, but also severe trauma like PTSD. They think it might be related to people with ADHD as well, because it's an overactive part of your brain. So basically what it is, it's nothing actually to do with your vision, because I had lots of eye tests as well. My vision's absolutely fine. I've got 20/20 vision. It's to do with the messages that your brain or your eyes give your brain. So instead of filtering the noise, mine doesn't. So I see everything that most people filter out, but I see everything. So yeah, it's something that I've learned to live with, but the health anxiety is still with me. It's something that I deal with on a daily basis. So if anything changes in my body, I go straight to worst case scenario, headache, I go to brain tumor, a lump, cancer. I don't go to logic. I straight away go to I'm going to die. I catastrophize everything. I play it like a film in my head, and that is something that I'm still working on. I work with my therapist on that every time I see her. I think the biggest thing I've learned through all of this is trauma doesn't just live in your memories, it lives in your body. And sometimes it just gets too much and your body can't deal with it. And it's because it's holding everything together, and it's been holding it together for so, so long. And if you're listening to this, I just want you to know that you're not alone. And if you've experienced something similar, or you're going through something similar, you're not broken. You're not alone. It's your trauma trying to come out in different ways. And I hope this helps someone, because I know if I'd listened to something like this several years ago, I know it would have helped me. The year later, I went to a retreat, and it was one of the best things I ever did. And it was very spiritual. And I am a little bit more spiritual now, but I never really was. And some people might find it a bit wanky, but I really liked it. And there's one exercise that we had to do where we had to go outside and we had to find a pebble, and the pebble had to give us this energy. And I picked up a few pebbles and I thought, I don't really like them. Don't really know why, probably the feel of them or the texture or the shape. I picked up this one pebble and I thought, I love it. I'm gonna take it. And we had to go inside and we had to decorate this pebble, but we also had to write down a saying that speaks to us. And the one thing that I put down on this pebble, and I still have it to this day, it's actually currently in my kitchen. It's been in my kitchen since I made it, by my kettle. So every time I come down in the morning, I switch the kettle on, or in the day, or I have a night tea in the evening, switch the kettle on, and it's right there and I can't miss it. And it says everything is going to be okay. And I wrote it because at the time, I genuinely didn't think I was going to survive. I was so I can't even fathom and explain or articulate the pain and the fear that I was in. But everything was okay, and everything is okay. And I really hope that if you're listening, you take that away, because everything will be okay. It will be okay. And I am okay. And I genuinely thought every day I was going to die. And I'm here. And I've created the Be Brave project, and I've created a podcast, and I speak out on social media, and I have never felt stronger and more empowered in my life. And yeah, it's taken time, but you will get there. And you will be okay. And I really hope that resonates with you, and you keep that here, that everything is going to be okay. That was a hard one for me to speak out, and I haven't ever really spoken about that before, so it's a lot. But I hope that resonated with you, and yeah, until next time, be brave.